Hi guys, it's Jake here at Canadian Cutting Edge, and today we're taking a look at a fixed blade knife. Again, this is a knife that is for Canadians. Well, not for Canadians, but it is sort of. It's only accessible at Canadian Tire stores in Canada. That's because Huntshield is a Canadian Tire brand. So if you're in the US and you live in a border state and you live close to the Canadian border, you'll probably be able to find one of these at one of the Canadian Tire stores. Just go to canadiantire.ca first and check and see if these guys are on sale. Because while this knife is pretty cool, and I'll skip to the ending, I recommend this knife if you buy it when it's on a special sale. I'm not sure if I recommend it at full price or not. Full price, 40 Canadian dollars, which is right around 32, 33 US pesos, depending on, I know some of you guys aren't going to like that, sorry about that, depending on the exchange rate on that certain day. US shekels, it's about 32 US shekels, how's that? So let's talk about this knife. We've got Aus 8 steel, we've got wood handle. It's a style that is a Canadian belt knife style. You put that in quotation marks. The style was created about 80, 90 years ago, if I remember correctly, maybe 100 years ago or so. I believe it was in Newfoundland. There was a designer who came up with this basic style. One of the biggest benefits is you can grab it like this and you still are able to work with most of the blade without hitting your knuckle on the surface that you're working. And that's because it was designed to be a great camp knife, an all-around utility knife for an outdoorsman. And that's sort of what I think it is. So if you want to see some more details on this knife, and you want to see some of me using this in the outdoors, in the Rocky Mountains, then stick around for the full review. I bought this knife this spring, 2017, and I've actually used it a fair bit, although it looks pretty pristine. I've taken care of it. And since it doesn't have a black coating, the coating doesn't wear off, so that's pretty good. Let's talk about the specs and everything, and then we'll get on to how much I like it and dislike it and the features and stuff like that. We've got a drop point blade. I've already mentioned the steel. Aus 8 is generally around 56, 57 Rockwell hardness, if I remember correctly. Shouldn't go off my memory. The wood, they don't say what the wood is. I think it's probably a rosewood of some kind. They are solid pieces of wood in here. I don't think it is engineered wood, although it may be. I could be wrong. It could be that they cut layers of it and glued it back together, but I don't think so. Now I've got a fair bit of experience with wood because working with wood was my first career as a cabinet maker, as a carpenter. All that kind of stuff is what I started off with. We've got a little bit of a front bolster here, and then you've got just, a tiny little ricasso there, hollow grind, no sharpener's choil, some jimping up here. It's really squared off jimping and pretty aggressive. Once your thumb's in there, the meat of it's not going to move. And with a fairly thick stock of steel here, it's quite robust. And, you can see that full tang going all the way through. Got a nice lanyard hold back here. And for a sheath, you have a real leather sheath, belt loop right there. A good 2-inch belt fits through there, no problem. A snap to hold the knife in place. You've got the name embossed there, the brand name Huntshield. And it's a decent leather sheath. The stitching is okay. And, for the price that I paid for it, $20 for this kit, I don't mind at all. $20 Canadian is around $15, $16 US. And for that price, I like what I've got. The specs, we've got a cutting edge, 9.5 centimeters, which is 3 3/4 inches, well, 3.74. The blade thickness is 3.9 millimeters, which is 0.15 inches. The thickness of the steel behind the grind is 0.76 millimeters, which is 0.03 inches. And for a knife of this size and an outdoorsman style, that is right on exactly what I'd like to see. So good job there. The handle thickness, 1.7 centimeters. That's 0.677 inches. The handle length, so from the very beginning of the handle to the tip of the end here, is 11.5 centimeters, 4.5 inches. And then your grip area between my fingers there is 10.2 centimeters, right on 4 inches. The complete length of this knife is 21.3 centimeters, 8.35 inches. The weight that you get on this is 5.2 ounces, 147 grams. Add the sheath in, it's 6.7 ounces, 193 grams. $40 is the regular price, $39.99 Canadian, and it goes on sale for half price or more, or less, I should say. 50% off, 60% off. I've seen it at 65% off sometimes. They go on sale about 4 or 5 times a year. So you just have to keep your eyes open for these guys to go on sale. And it won't be the entire series that goes on sale at the same time, but usually it's 2 or 3 other knives that goes on sale at the same time. There was once that I saw the whole series of these fixed blade with wooden handles, and I believe there's 4 blades in this series, and they were all on sale at one time once, and that was pretty cool. Of course, I couldn't get them all at the same time. So CanadianTire.ca is where you check to see if it's on sale. If you're in Canada, just check your flyers, and off you go. Fit and finish on this knife, I call it fair, average. Some of them are poor. You do really need to check your knife before you buy it. When you go into the store and they show you the knives, don't just accept the first one that they show you. Take several out of the packaging. They've got no problem with that. Unless it's a new employee there who doesn't know what he's doing. They've got no problem letting you inspect a few of them. Because what you see often is the space between the wood and the bolster up here. Sometimes we'll have some filling in it. This one's got some filling on this side. And it's pretty good on this side. What I've seen more often, though, is chip out, especially here by the lanyard hole. And you can get a good sized bit of wood chipped right out. And that's a problem. And sometimes wood in other places is chipped out. I think they're just not taking proper care of their wood, and there's issues that way. So take a good look at the knife that you're getting, and if you want one of these knives, and get the best one that they have. If they've got 5 in stock, look at all 5 of them and just choose the best one. What are the pros and cons of this knife? Well, before we get into that, let me show you some video of my time with this knife in the Rocky Mountains. The Canadian knife by Huntshield. Try to make some feather sticks with this little guy. I think it's going to work quite fine. I started just below a little knot there. Wasn't the best place to start, but you can see that it works. Let's watch the Huntshield make some sparks. I've got a ferro rod here that's hardly been used at all, so might have to scrape off some paint first. Even in that bright sunlight, you can hear that and see that. That's working just fine. Okay, so what do you think? I think the knife works quite well. I don't really recommend this to baton with. For one, it's way too small. You could use it to make a little bit of kindling if the wood is small to start with, taking off small pieces and doing that. Hollow grinds just are not good for pounding on the spine with. I did that with one of the knives that I had from this Huntshield series, and I created a nice little warp in the blade here. The thickness of the edge behind the grind was a little too thin. It was actually a bit thinner than this one, and it just warped up. So that's not the greatest. If you are going to baton with a hollow grind, you need a real good thickness behind the grind. You need this blade back here to be, 1.5 millimeters thick instead of just, 3/4 of a millimeter thick like this one is. You want some substance back there so that when the pressure's on, it doesn't break or bend or warp or whatever. A flat grind, either a full flat grind or a saber grind is much better because you got much more strength behind the edge. This is thin behind the edge before it starts getting thick up here. So you got, a quarter of an inch almost before it starts getting thick enough to take that kind of use. So on a knife like this, I would call batoning, a big time batoning. Certainly that would be abusive for this knife, for the grind and the steel and, all things considered. So, but that's not the purpose of this knife. If you want an all-around knife that does everything, well, A, it doesn't exist. B, it's not this knife. Size of this knife, perfect. I've got large hands, just bordering on extra large, and this fits in my hand very well. And there's room for, a little bit more if my hands were a little bit bigger. And if you've got smaller hands, this knife works very well as well. My wife used this knife for, in the cooking preparation while we were camping as well. And, so it's a good knife for that kind of stuff. Comfortable. The sheath is good. It's made well. It's stayed together. It hasn't shown any, negative wear. When the knife is in the sheath, it holds on pretty good, but it's loose. It's going to wiggle. It can make some noise, but it doesn't fall out. And, I could pull it out. I could force it to come out. I was pulling fairly hard, but just under normal use, this blade is probably going to stay just fine where it is, and it hangs quite well. It's a good sheath for what you're paying, especially when you buy it on sale. So that's the good stuff. The negatives I already talked about. I don't prefer a hollow grind on an Outdoorsman knife. I would prefer a sharpener's trail down here. It just makes, when I'm sharpening it, a little bit cleaner. So there you go. That's that. Let's just throw in a little bit of cut tests here. Here's my Molly, and this knife, I've used it quite a bit. I'm recording this at the end of August. I've used this knife all summer, and I haven't stropped it or anything, so I was able to make it through that without too much trouble. Now let's try some paracord. So we've got 4 layers of paracord there, and it zipped through all 4 of those, no problem. And, it's a fairly sharp knife that cuts pretty well, and you can cut this way as well. It's a good knife. Not a great knife. Nope, I don't call it a great knife, but I call it a good knife. Looks good, works good. The shape is the best point on this. I'm using the thing, and the knife goes down on the table, and I can cut all the way back to past the middle of the blade, not right to the end because my fingers are a little bit too thick. My wife had no problem getting right, even further. And you can always hold it up a little bit. You can hold it like this and easily, well, you can hold any knife like that, but so it's a good Outdoorsman camping style knife, not too heavy. And, if you do need it in an emergency for some self-defense, the drop point blade with a nice sharp point there, it can be useful for some self-defense. The tip is not the strongest. Don't be using it for tip testing. It'll fail your tip test. So there you go. That's the knife. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thanks for liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing, all that good stuff, especially the comments. I like responding to you guys and talking with you. If you've got any questions or comments about these knives, let me hear them. And thank you so much again. Remember, always cut towards your chum and not your thumb.